Hello, everybody, and welcome to another A Better Way of Life. If you can hear the drums, Fernando, it's your son playing in the background, is it not?
It is. It is. I think that's his way of de-stressing. He's got his
Yeah.
GCSEs at the moment, so
Oh, well, so apologies if it sounds like you're being floated underwater at this moment in time, if that's a thing.
he's good. He's good.
Yeah.
But
But for other people, it probably sounds like that. You see, drums always sound better when you're there. Drums always feel better when you're there doing it as well.
it's
I
funny.
think,
I never used to really think much of drums. That they were just that, and ever since he's been doing it, now I always watch the drummer, and I get quite annoyed. He did something for school thing once. He was picked, and they had to do it at the cathedral, and the singers were stood at the front, the backing singers were stood at the front, right in the way of him, and they weren't doing anything. And I thought it would have, I love watching a drummer. I think it's amazing. Now I've been trying to learn, both of mine are trying to teach me, and the guitar. Yesterday, my youngest taught me a little bit on the guitar.
oh, really? What did you learn?
I can't remember what to say. Is it Nothing Else Matters? It wasn't much. It was.
Wow.
I don't know if it was that. No, it was just something. We went like one strum of something, and then you went 1, 2, 3, 4 down, and then up or something, and then you did that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm not very good. Well, I was
Very
okay.
good.
I was okay.
Yeah.
But
It's fun. It's fun to
something
try these
different.
things.
Yeah, I was never musical, but because they're boys, they don't tend to, despite me trying, which is interesting what we're going to talk about. I've had to try and connect with them in ways that they enjoy. Not necessarily, but they've always been things I thought I wouldn't do, but actually I quite enjoy it. So
Good.
yeah.
Good. Tell everybody, because it's quite exciting, what is it we're going to talk about today?
I don't know how we're going to how do I phrase it?
Well,
Emotional laziness.
emotional laziness. Is it emotional laziness? Isn't it? I think a very simple way of putting it, which was defined many years ago, is that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. So we're going to talk about the differences between men and women this morning, not necessarily the obvious differences between men and women. We'll leave that to your own sordid imaginations. But maybe things like the emotional differences between men and women, maybe the way that some men behave, some women behave. Obviously, we'd like to caveat all of this conversation with saying that actually, of course, everybody is an individual, and of course, not everybody behaves in a particular way that falls into a particular, nuance or whatever.
No,
but
there
it's
are psychological findings to support generalizations.
yes, and we are not particularly saying one thing or another. We just want to open up the conversation around differences, maybe between men and women, and some of the problems that we always see, and that maybe get filtered out into the interweb as well from that. So let's start the conversation. Why did we start this conversation, or why did we come up with this conversation in the first place? Why do we think it's so relevant?
You and I often, because you work from home and I work from home quite a lot, we work together quite a lot. Often we have little rants about various things that go on in our houses, which might involve children, might involve partners. And actually, what I think is really good is that I think that the more people talk, and I do talk to females. I had an experience years ago with that kind of fell out with a friend that kind of caused some trust issues. And actually now I tend to find, interestingly, sort of talking with men is quite an education as well as quite interesting, but also probably more the way my brain tends to work. So I think it may have involved milk, the reason why we were talking, but I don't know if it was. I think we were talking about how it can be perceived that men in relationships sometimes can't really be bothered. Perceived. I use the word perceived there because that's why we then went on further to talk about that.
Can we be bothered as men? Is it that we can't be bothered? What are we not being bothered about? I think one of the things that we speak a lot about is men seem to think that they're doing stuff, especially around the house.
I think that's what it was.
I think they think that they're doing stuff when actually maybe the perception from a female point of view is that they're not actually doing what they think that they're doing. So examples are
what female wants.
Okay, or not what female wants. So the examples would be that a man might think that he's done a lot in the kitchen, for example, by producing a meal, but then may not actually tidy up at all after himself or put stuff away. May come into the kitchen and do one element like get everything out of the dishwasher and then put some stuff away, but then completely ignore the fact that there's a mess on the side. May type,
barbecue. I read this, that was a perfect example. I read it was a meme or something on Facebook the other day, and it said on there, man's, again, I didn't write this, but these things are around because they resonate with people. A female's contribution to the barbecue. So it would have been like clean the kitchen, went out and did all the shopping so wrote the shopping list, went and did the shopping, made this, made that, sorted out the girl, made sure they had something to eat outside, got the drinks, invited friends, blah 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 blah. Man's contribution, went out, so set the barbecue up, did all this, announced to everybody it was ready. And then the females bit was tidy up, blah, 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 blah. And I think this is some of what does probably, and when I was reading up about this as well, because it interested me, was that I think women get quite, I know personally for me, the things that women do, often you can't quantify and nobody sees them.
Right.
DIY men tend to do. And the problem is, you've got a finished article, haven't you, with that? Oh, look, isn't it marvellous? I put this together, or I did this, or did that. Whereas women, you clean up, and you all understand this. So my husband used to look after the kids certain days a week, and you all understand. So he would know what it was like to clear up, and they trash the place before anybody else has ever seen that it was tidy. So he's probably a little bit more, have more empathy, but I hear from some people that they're not always that understanding. But the other thing I hear from numerous men that I know, the infamous list of jobs that the women give their men, the DIY list, and men. And on a more serious note, from what I hear, it actually, and I hadn't thought about it, and it's made me think about it a bit more, is that actually can be quite a burden for men, and it can be something that really wears them down because they feel like there's just this constant list. However, what I have tried to say is, yes, they might get that list. And again, reading up about all this, women have a constant list of stuff going on.
Okay, I'm gonna get really raw and honest about this, and I don't often, but I do very little DIY, and the reason being is because my wife is absolutely brilliant at DIY. She's the daughter of a builder. She, as far as she's concerned, she has the skill set. I'm not going to argue with that because my skill set when it comes to DIY is rubbish. I have got two levels of I've got one level of DIY and gardening, right? And they both involve just hacking at stuff. I'm brilliant. I'm absolutely brilliant. If it's DIY in the home, like the room that I'm sitting in now, we had damp rot, dry rot in the floor in here. All the floor had to be pulled up. All of the walls, the plaster and everything had to be knocked off. I had to dig down because to pour concrete. All of that I did. And I was absolutely in my element doing that. It was hard work. It was a slog, but basically it required no skill whatsoever, just getting dirty and then lugging stuff out. Anything with a skill, putting up a shelf, cutting something, angling something, anything else, masticking stuff, whatever, I will make a complete pig's ear of. I do not touch. If I do touch it, everyone knows that I've touched it. It's disastrous, right? I leave painting, even that. But it does leave me feeling, because men are meant to be good at this stuff, it ends up leaving me, when my wife is doing that stuff and she's like doing the new room and she's painting it and whatever, and she's going like, I'm really tired because I've been doing all of this. I feel like saying stupidly, yeah, but I would help. But I feel like I should be contributing physically to that, but actually she doesn't want me to, because she knows that it will be a mess. I know it will be a mess, but there's a kind of innate thing in me that says men should be good at this. I should be good at this. I should be doing it. Where that comes from, I do not know. Whether it's because, some
No,
people
it
probably.
is because I was reading up about this, about the and this came a bit earlier on. I'm on a sort of baby group because my youngest is nearly 12, but we've all kept in contact. So, and somebody said on there, ladies, how on earth do you stay on top of everything? Okay, I'm working full time and I just can't do everything, and I'm really struggling. The house looks a tip, blah 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 blah. So of course, people started putting stuff in, and someone said, "Oh, I'm with you on this. I'm really struggling." And I had a meltdown the other day because I asked people to do things, and they, the kids don't do it, and I asked them to do that. My husband doesn't do that, and then I had a meltdown because, and in the end, it's just quicker that I just do it myself. But by the time I've nagged everybody, so I joined in and I said, "Yeah." I'm with you on this as well, because she said all it gets seen is that I'm nagging. So all these women were saying about the fact they're seen as being a nag. But I thought it was really interesting that I've had this conversation here, that do men just not see stuff or something, and it starts at a young age? I mean, I don't know if that's girls at a young age, but I say to my kids, did you think that there was like a little mouse or something that was going to drink this much milk that you just left in the bottom of the carton because you couldn't be bothered to just put it in the bin? Because clearly you could have put that bit of extra milk in your cereal, given that you've got about this much too much extra milk anyway in your bowl. Just leaving stuff around. So when I say, could you just toilet seat, is really winds me up. And then where I sit to have tea, I say, can you please shut the toilet door? Because I don't want to see the toilet when I'm eating my tea. And they've not been brought up like this either. They know to do all these things. Towels, I fold towels up and they look nice up on the shelf. I do it in colour, so I do it so that the sizes are right. I just don't think, and when I was reading about this, that's what we were talking about whether men's, do they psychologically or is it physically, do they not see those things? Because that's what we talked about, was that if I was saying to you that I think it's great that men and women do talk, whether it's in a relationship or not. Sometimes better if it's not, actually, because you can learn. I often say that I think I should like coach men or something to understand women more, because for me, particularly when I was diagnosed with my ADHD, it got me to look at my brain a bit more and how I react to things. And so if I look back at previous relationships, like from many years ago, even then I'd think, oh, he doesn't do this, that means he doesn't care. He doesn't, I would say message, but that was, text messages weren't around so much then. But I went out with somebody, his text message response would be K for okay.
Right.
So I would always be left feeling like he doesn't care. But actually, when I started looking at it, it was that he was giving all of what he was. So I either
Yeah.
learned to accept him like that and not change him, or get out, sort of thing. But then there comes the thing that I think if you're able to understand, I would say, the opposite sex a bit more and communicate, and like I said, sometimes I think that doesn't even necessarily start in a relationship. Even having conversations with you, I might say to you, oh God, and then you'll go, well, that's not because he's this, or it's not because of that, it's just. So it's quite interesting, I think, to understand how, and I think that the opposite sex both needs to understand. So it may be, let's just say, that men don't message as much. So my head would kind of go, okay, so if that's not what that person does, from my experience with men, don't nag them. Don't keep saying about it, because that's seen as nagging. And the more you nag, the more they'll not want to do it. So actually, if you embrace, okay, that's the way they are, and you explain, okay, well, if you messaged me, that makes me feel like you care about me. If you approach it from a different way, you actually get a better response. So again, my old friend Rob Dyer was saying this about, if you want to improve communication, if you've got a teenager, let's just say, and they're leaving stuff all over the place, rather than going on at them about what they haven't done, is the second they do the minutest, littlest of anything, you praise the out of it, absolutely praise it. And that I've really tried to start remembering, because
But
it's,
do you know what's really funny about that is that in that respect, we are not too dissimilar to dogs. If you've ever watched my namesake, Graham, the dog whisperer guy on the TV, 9 times out of 10, when he goes in to sort a problem with dogs, do you know what he says? And actually, how many times have we said this lately in conversations? He says, do you know what? The problem isn't with the dog. The problem is with you. It's actually, a lot of the time, the problem is actually with the person looking on. It's not actually with the dog themselves. The thing is, you feed an energy and you feed information to somebody by the way that you react to them, right?
yeah,
So often with a dog, he'll say, "Do you know what? Do you know why it's barking? It's because you're getting nervous when this happens, or you're getting excited when this happens." And you show the dog that you're getting nervous or you're getting excited, and then what happens is the dog feeds off of that energy and thinks, "I should be responding in some way here," and so it responds. And as soon as you actually do the opposite and you go, "All right, I'll just ignore that," the dog thinks, "Oh, there's nothing to react to here. So, oh, actually," and then, as you say as well, he'll say all of the time, say, when the dog then does what you want the dog to do, you actually tell the dog, "You're doing what I want you to do." The dog goes, "Ah, I should be doing this, not that." Boom. But I don't think we do that in relationships a lot of the time. I think
no,
what we
it's
do is
really,
we, you
you
know,
know, no, as you say, it's, and it really made me, like I said, I love Robert Isle stuff, because it's quite quick, and it's stuff that's quite simple, actually. It's not, we were talking earlier on about coaching, and about how I think, for me, I think somebody said to me a while ago about engaging in a 3-month coaching program, and I, with my ADHD brain, went, yeah, right, I don't think so. But I mean, he's got ADHD himself, but actually what he does is he's got very short, sharp things that you can do that do work. They absolutely work, and it's about what you want. So on there, it was, if you want, you have an idea of what you want a partner to do, and so yeah, it's that I'm gonna have a go, or a child, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, instead of, because actually, really, when you think about any relationship, whether it's at work, children, partner, whoever, the more somebody's going to go down, the more somebody's going to go on at you, you just think, oh, off. That's how it's going to make you feel, because that's how it's going to make you feel. And I've watched it with my 15, 16-year-old. And I've seen also how I've sort of tried to coach my husband into how to speak to him to get the best out of him. And I said, and I've said about that. I said, look, and even then, when I've had to try and say to him, I've then had to put a caveat in. I've struggled with it too. I've had to say to him, look, this is how you need to deal with him. I struggle with him too, because otherwise he'll see that as a nag and a criticism. So I've had to sort of get on board to say that I've struggled. This is what works. So it's all of this is about, it's just really about communication. And I think it's about putting yourself in somebody else's position. But the other bit of what we talked about was, and I said to you, I was reading about this, was, I know why it was. It was to do with the fact I had a conversation with somebody who said about their hobbies. That's why it was.
Oh,
I
hobbies
was
is a
speaking
great one.
to somebody who was talking about their hobby. So this person's got a hobby where they go off walking and like doing some outdoor activity stuff. And so they go off quite frequently at the weekend. They've got, I think it's a 4-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I'm thinking, right, okay. Straight off, I'm thinking this because it made me think of something that came up when I was doing my training. Because people have to do their micro teach, so quite often I'll say to people, okay, pick something. It doesn't have to be to do with work. It can be to do with a hobby. 9 times out of 10, the woman will go, I haven't got any. I can't pick a hobby because I haven't got one. And straight off, the men, generally, men will have something and they'll go, oh yeah, I'm going to do about this. Well, the wife hates me doing this. I sort of take a deep breath and say, well, so I do a bit of relationship coaching there. But so this person was saying that their wife gets really annoyed with the fact that their equipment hangs around the place and it takes up a lot of time and it costs quite a lot of money. And I said, well, maybe she's got a point. Does she have any hobbies? Well, she could if you wanted to, but she doesn't want to. And I said, it might not be that she doesn't want to. It's just that, how are you going to fit it all in? The woman, generally speaking, will sit there and go, well, I've caught myself doing it, and I know women do it, that I will say, I'm just going to nip to the shop. I'm just going to pop to the gym. I won't be long. I'm just going to go out and see my friend. I'll take the kids with me if you want me to. And I don't know if, I don't think that is because, I think that's, and again, I was reading about this, that those gender roles that women feel like that's what they should do. So I went to Amsterdam at the weekend, and I really, really struggled with the fact that I went because it cost money. So the friend that I went with hasn't got children, and we try to pick a time that would work, would work for both of us. And I had to keep feeling really guilty, saying, oh, I can't go then because of this, and I can't go then, despite the fact I knew that the other person was just going to be able to go whenever they wanted. So then when we got there, I was then, and even before, I was conscious, and I had to make a point of saying, look, if we can't do things, I don't mean to be difficult. It's just really, really difficult for me to justify spending that. So even though my husband's always said, look, go and treat yourself to this, it's still, and again, generally speaking, from speaking to friends of mine, they'll say, I just can't justify spending that money on myself. And yet lots of males that I know or that I see will say, well, I work. Why shouldn't I have that? And I wonder if that's a lot of where it comes from, is that it's not so much now, but women may not work, as in paid work, or they work part-time. So I know for me, I always feel like I'm not putting as much financially into the home. Now I'm starting to, but I still would feel like it's a bit of an extravagance. Or even at home emotionally, so my husband will go, if he's tired, he'll say, I'm going to go to bed. This is why we talked about it as well. And yet my son gets quite anxious. And so at the moment, he'll often quite come up to me at night with the GCSE. Tim won't know anything about that, but they kind of know, and reading about it as well, that women do have a higher emotional intelligence generally.
Yeah.
But I don't know if some of it, I don't know, because you work at home and you're around the kids a lot more. I do wonder if sometimes men don't do things for fear of getting it wrong. So women will be more emotional. So because women have that higher emotional intelligence generally, they might be more willing to engage in that side of things, and men will quite often go, oh, can you deal with that because you're better? So there's a fear of, if I do it wrong, she's going to have a go at me, which is probably true because a woman probably will.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think there is a lot of kind of gender stereotyping in there, and
Yeah.
I hope
No,
that
I
anyone
wasn't. No, I
listening,
wasn't. It's
no,
not though.
not from you, but
No.
I hope that anyone listening to this hopes takes it that we're not gender stereotyping. We are just talking about real life experiences and you know, some observations, etc., etc. And you know, there is some writing on all of this as well. I think what I find really interesting is I personally, as a man, struggle with the whole male hobby thing as well, because probably because I'm utterly jealous. I would love to have one of these, or would I? I don't know, but
Well, I think
so
you would
many
if you
men.
wanted to. You would.
I think so many men have these hobbies, and I do see it more with men than women. I have to say that so many men have these hobbies where they buy old minis and they do them up or whatever, and actually the wife ends up being kind of taken along as
Well, there's
part of
that,
it.
whatever widow, isn't it? They call it a. There's like a phrase of being a whatever widow, as in the woman's left
Or they
because the
go along
man's.
with it, or they go along with it. They have to be part of the dream and whatever else as well. But it's really the man's kind of vision, etc. But um you know, but and I get it sometimes as well. I find, you know, one of the things I really hate is assumptions.
Yeah.
Absolutely hate assumptions that people make. And I find in business from other men, sometimes there are a lot of assumptions. Like people will be like, oh well, we're having this day. Perhaps you know, you could come along and do this, and you know, we're all playing golf or we're all doing it, and it's like, I don't play golf. I look after the children. I do this. I do that. I I don't have the time to do that. I
And
work. I do
yeah.
what I do really well, but it's almost like you're not in you're kind of letting the side down out or not getting involved like you should be as a male in this because you're not doing this stuff. And it's
So I think
like,
Tim, yeah, Tim has had that. I mean, he's not somebody who um he'll say I panic going to things because blokes will want to talk about football, rugby. He said I can do motor racing. He said I can do that. He said, but other than that, I go into a panic. So I think he tends to not engage in stuff like that because he doesn't go to the pub and things. And it's funny because I wonder if it almost starts at school at times, because I remember when Samuel was at school and they said, oh, he doesn't want to be on the football team. He doesn't join in with that sort of thing. And I said, no, he probably won't because he doesn't like the responsibility of being on the team. But interestingly, he then found out that sort of suddenly that it would make him be part of a group if he could. He soon sort of got out of that when he realised that he said it was all about winning, and that's not what he was. That's not what he was wanting to be about. But it's interesting you just said about the golf thing, because it's true that then though in business though that alienates women. And I've said this before. I've said, well, okay, you have a golf day, but where does this, if I'm on a team, where does that leave me then? Because I'll have a go at golf, and I've played it when I lived in the States. You ain't going to be waiting for me because I don't do it very often. So how am I going to feature in all this if it's a team building day? Or but the hobby thing is a funny thing, but I do think as well that women don't help themselves in some respects, because I think we can be generally, again, martyrs a little bit. And like I said, this weekend I felt really guilty, and even working away now more that I do. And I keep reminding myself that Tim used to work away all the time when the kids were younger. But also, how did that affect him? Because him and I have had conversations about that.
Yeah.
Even when you think about, I feel very sorry for men when they're kind of made out to be useless and yet chucked out. That when they have, when you have a baby, it's like years ago they weren't allowed in at all. Then they were allowed in. And actually, not very long after I had both of mine, they were chucked out of the room again. And you think, well, and how does that? I remember Tim saying to me the first night when we had Samuel, obviously I was in, well, not obviously, but I was in, and he messaged me and he said, this feels very strange being at home on my own, and I've got a new little family that's in hospital, and I'm here on my own and I don't know what to do. He said, I've gone and played on the PS4 because I don't really know what to do with myself. And I thought, gosh, that's massive. That's really, really big. And there's all these there's a lot of societal norms about what men should and shouldn't do. But again, somebody said to me, a guy said to me the other day that they felt really down, felt stupid saying about it.
Yeah.
And I said, why? And said, that's not what you're meant to feel like. And I said, you feel like you're meant to feel. I don't think men actually are underneath it all. What do you know what I mean?
People think they are. Yeah,
and what they're portraying, because actually once what I find is once that trust is there, it's like, okay, well, I can trust to tell you this because you won't laugh, tell anyone, say that I'm stupid. And the sad thing is that, and that's why when I talk about this in my training, I say, I'm me, and I am me when I'm in the training, and I encourage my trainers to be them when they do their training, to encourage their people to be themselves, so that actually in the end we don't have to have days of I say, when we're focusing on men and mental health problems, that actually it just becomes acceptable that that's what men do. It's almost like you're accepted more if you do talk about your feelings.
Again, I may be making assumptions here, and I apologise if people feel they are. The whole point of this is it's to open up.
It's about unraveling all of this, isn't it?
I know. We're just unraveling, and that's what I just want to keep emphasising that, because I know this is social media. People will read it, they'll go, "Oh, you're saying this," and we're not saying that. We're just throwing stuff out there for you to unravel and throw other stuff back, and let's all learn together, because none of us really have the answers when it comes to this sort of stuff. But one of the things that I do wonder is, it always seems to me that men make more of an effort at the beginning of a relationship, and I do wonder whether part of the problem that comes in relationships, especially male-female relationships, etc., is down to, and again, there will be individuals that this doesn't relate to, or this is stereotyping to some extent, but I do wonder whether part of it is perhaps women just have a more nurturing nature to them, full stop, right? outside of the sort of like mothering nurturing nature, they just nurture people and relationships more.
Some of that
And
will be
whether
the estrogen side of things, yeah.
Yeah, and whether men, their kind of mental trajectory with relationships is that I have to really be focused on it until the point where I'm actually happy with it. And I wonder whether actually, for a lot of people, where relationships start going wrong is actually when the men are happy. And it actually, weirdly, right? And I expect you get this. People will. I'd love to hear from relationship experts on this. I bet a lot of relationships actually break down at a point where
It's just all
it
good.
seems like it's all good. And I reckon one of the problems may be that
Bit of
at
foot off
that
the gas.
point, the man may start going, well, I'm actually really happy now. And therefore, I don't need to nurture the relationship because I've nurtured the relationship to a point where I'm happy with the relationship. And now I don't have to carry on with the nurturing. Maybe they then focus their attentions elsewhere in terms of like, self-development or, their hobby or something else like that,
Well, I've got
almost thinking that bit's done. I've done that. I've brought that from there to there, and I've done that bit, not realizing that it needs, like a plant, continual nurturing, right? But that may be not naturally within a male skill set. Maybe I'm just saying, I'm just surmising, I'm just throwing an idea out there.
It's interesting you say that because again, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about, I was saying about a number of people I know that relationships have broken down or whatever for whatever reason, and then we were talking about whether there was if you go back to I don't know I can't remember what you called it now, that's the idea that when you meet somebody and you're thinking about potentially having children, let's just say that you would maybe, even if it's not consciously, there's that innate thing of thinking about choosing a female who would, if you're talking about male female relationship, of course, that they would be a good mother. So you'd be looking for those qualities. So you do your business, and then the female has a baby, and actually and this was a male saying it, that potentially it's seen that for a man they've done their job now, and the woman's done their job. The woman has done their job, and so actually that whole nurturing that relationship and nurturing the woman, and that what often happens though is that the woman is busy being the mum and doing everything that comes with that because that's what they feel like they should do. Whether that's, I don't know whether that's societal or maternal. The man's like, well, I'm going to go and hunter gatherer, I'm going to look after my family by earning money, which potentially is where the having the hobbies, because I've gone out and worked, I need to have a break. Women often don't give themselves a break because they feel guilty because of those societal norms that even when you think about all the about birthday parties, and you were talking this morning about dress up days and all this stuff, that once when my eldest, he went to secondary school, and I moved my other son. And once I checked out of the parent or mum thing, I was so much happier because I didn't see what everybody else was doing. Mine didn't want to dress up in this. They didn't want to engage in all those things. And so I didn't, whether some of that is that neurodiversity, I don't know. But it didn't really bother me. I didn't really want to engage with groups of women anyway. But I don't think women help themselves, but they engage in those conversations. Whereas I would just say, for all you people that look at those newsletters, just give me a bulletin about what I need to do, because I can't be bothered to read an essay to find out whether it's dress up day or whatever, whatever day it is. Just give me a bulletin of it or bullet point it or something. But I think, I don't know if that's where maybe those relationships fall down, and maybe it's inevitable, or whether whether you were saying about with Americans, often they just routinely will have coaches or therapy or whatever. Maybe they see that it's not a bad thing. I think it's seen as a bad thing in this country that if you have therapy or counselling, that's bad. Whereas actually, if we put that in as a preventative thing, then it might help things more, because when you're whether it's men and women or whatever it is, when you put two people together and then you add children into the equation,
Right.
every time you add to it.
Yeah, and we spoke about that earlier, and that's where I wanted to go next, very briefly, which is children, because I want to say, and I'm an authority on this, folks. I will safely say that I'm an authority on this because I have 5 children. All right, so for anyone that wants to know the credentials, there you are, 5 children. Children throw a spanner in the works. And I think they throw a spanner, and I was saying to you, I think they do throw a spanner into the works of the relationship between a husband and a wife, and and potentially between other people in the house as well, because children, they all have their little quirks and whatever. But one of the things that I find that children are really very good at is kind of playing the game with parents.
Well, let me just add in here, this could be same-sex relationships as well.
Oh, absolutely. So this really goes with anyone that's got children. But what children are really, one thing that children are really, really good at is just kind of sidling in and doing stuff. And a lot of the time they know that this stuff will actually cause arguments between the parents. And how many of you out there, I want hands up now at this point, how many of you have had an argument with your other half, your partner, your spouse, your whatever, and when you've finished having an argument between the two of you about it, you've actually then suddenly had the epiphany, you've come to the realization that actually it was neither of your faults. It was actually a child. A child's actually done it. A child's actually caused it. The car keys have gone missing, or I remember very, very early on with our first child. I remember such a vibrant memory. This, my wife was having such a go about where the car keys have gone. I was getting the blame. One of the other children were getting the blame. The dog was getting the blame. Everybody was getting the blame for this. And then there was shouting going backwards and forwards between all of us about where the car keys were. Innocent little, our firstborn, Addy, sitting there on the steps looking all innocent, saying he has no idea where they were, whatever. Eventually, Addison owned up that he'd hidden them. Oh my word. Oh my word. And it had caused complete chaos. I mean,
other stuff came up as well. It then leads into, it doesn't just become about the keys. It's, you always do this, and every time you do that, which then.
But they're great at it. I mean, you know, it and it's little things as well. People are going to love this bit of content. It's the little stuff, like I've got it at the moment with one of them. Every single night, right? I go and I will be one of the last people in the kitchen at night, and I will check and I will make sure that there's enough milk in the fridge for me to have a cup of coffee or tea in the morning, and for people to have cereal, etc. And I'll check and I'll have a look. And we buy 2-liter big balls, and there could be like three-quarters of one of them in there, and I think that's plenty. That's fine for the next night.
Nighttime cereal eater.
And then get the nighttime cereal eater, who at 11 o'clock at night decides to go downstairs, get a bowl of cereal. In fact, the other day I went up to his bedroom, brought down 6 bowls. Right.
Oh, we have iced coffee as well involved in the equation here as well.
No, normally just a whole glass of milk. Have cereal, 1 or 2 bowls of cereal, then a glass of milk, whatever. Come down in the morning, absolutely gone. No milk for anybody, right? And then it will be like, well, why didn't you check? Why didn't you check? I did check. Well, what there was probably not enough. Yes, there wasn't. The thing is, it all just kicks off, right? Kicks off. I end up then having the next morning whiz to the shop to get the milk for everybody before and whatever,
Throws
and
everybody through and
then I'm not helping, and then I'm not helping with getting people getting dressed and everything else as well. Then that causes kids. They do this stuff, and it absolutely causes complete and utter chaos.
I
You talk
know that
to them about it. What do they say? Did I? Did I? That's the other thing. They don't just admit it and say sorry. They tell you, did you? Like, it's almost like, why are you asking me this question? You're the adult here. You should know. You know that I've done it. But why are you making a fuss about it? Why are you
mine have
getting
been
so
really
angry?
called in the rows, because what they'll do is they'll approach each parent. So
Oh,
what they'll do is, mine it will be because he doesn't want to go to something. Usually it's because they don't want to go to something. My upbringing, my mum was pretty hardcore, so I literally had to have a leg hanging off or have external bleeding or something going on before I was allowed to give up on something, really,
yeah,
or be off school or anything like that. Whereas my husband's parent, he had quite a different upbringing, so he didn't work. Wasn't allowed to work when he was growing up, and whereas I had a job from 14, and I had to remember walking up to work at 5:30 in the morning to do a breakfast shift and stuff. My mum did love me very much, but so I know exactly what happens. If they want to give something up, they trot off to dad's and they'll put their case forward. It's making me ill. I don't like it. It's sad. It's too tiring, whatever it is. So he then will go, oh, okay. So he's done that. Okay. So just by saying, okay, that child's like, yes, I've got him on board here. This is good. So he'll then know, Tim will know that we've got to speak to mum about it. So quite rightly, he'll say, obviously, you need to speak to mum about that. They come and speak to me. I then will say, okay, well, I think you ought to give it another go, blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, great, isn't it? You're forcing me to do this. And this is the usual one. He wants to go at boxing one of the days, oh, God. Of course, now, even though Tim would have gone along with me, even though he'll go along with it, it doesn't matter because I'm the bad one by now. So I then trot to him and say, great, because of how you dealt with that. He said, but I didn't. I said he had to speak to you. And I said, yeah, but don't say anything. Don't even put any expression on your face about whether you agree or disagree until we've all discussed it. Because they now think he's the bad one.
I'm going to bring balance to force. Do you know what? At this point and juncture, at 47 minutes into this podcast, I don't really care if people are going to have a go at me afterwards.
No, I think you and I are actually very, very measured in our.
Okay, but a lot of men do this, and I'm going to be completely honest. I have done this before now, where I have sided with the children on stuff in order to gain favour. I'll put my hand up. I've done that, right?
And this is what comes down to the lazy bit. It's the easiest. Is it that? Because I know.
No. This is it. You think it's the easy. You think it's the lazy thing. You think it's the easy route.
Not even lazy, but it's the quicker.
No, it's not even that. And I'll tell you what it is. It's complete and utter jealousy. And that's one of the reasons. And that's one of the reasons why men do it, is because how many times have you had it in your home where, like, the kids, they'll run into the bedroom, or it'll be like a special day or whatever, and they all run up to mummy, and they go, "Mummy, I love you. Mummy, I love you." Or just even like when they're saying goodbye or whatever, they go like, "Oh, I've got to say goodbye to mummy." Right, you leave the house as the man. It's like, bye. Right, or I have it virtually every morning. The kids pile in to the bed. They go over the top of me to argue and fight over who cuddles mum.
I wish I had that.
Right. Well, there you go. But what I'm saying is, right, sometimes I wonder whether it's partly out of that. I wonder whether it's partly out of there's a bigger demonstration of love from the children to the mother, maybe because of the way that the mother demonstrates love openly out towards the children or whatever. and then the dad's feeling kind of like, well, what do I have to do around here to get a little bit of attention?
Or
And
it's the treat
therefore,
giving. Maybe it's the treat giving, and that's why women sort of then get a bit naffed off, because it's like, well, and then I think that's with relationships that, you know, where we're living separately, that I've heard it very often as well, where mum will say, "Oh, Annie gave them all this, and I'm the one that does all of that." But actually, it must be incredibly hard, whether it's if the child isn't living full time with dad, that actually, and I don't like it as well when I hear women quite often in a relationship where dad does want to know, that they'll say, "Well, why should he have them on Christmas Day?" And I do get a little bit protective because I've seen it in a previous relationship where that kind of thing was said, and it must be incredibly difficult. And so, as you say, if it is giving a treat or siding with them, it's actually some way of, I'm here too. That I'm
yeah,
here too, and actually, if I can get them to,
and again, and this might come back to it. Maybe it's just because men are slightly different in terms of their emotional intelligence and whatever. And maybe we look at it and we, you know,
what's that more practical, isn't it?
if there's an easy way to demonstrate some kind of connection, right? Maybe that's the male way of doing it,
Yeah, but these
as opposed to putting in the effort.
Yeah,
You
but I
know?
think that's where actually, if you think, when I think back to birthday parties years ago, you know, women will have present drawer. Generally speaking, women have present drawers. It's just what we do. And a friend of mine said once, "Oh God, I let my husband sort that out because I was away, and then he just bunged a tenner in a card." But actually, really though, I think women could learn quite a lot from that, because they emotionally exhaust themselves trying to do all of that
Oh,
stuff. When actually, in the end, if that did it, and I don't know if some of it is women emotionally exhausting themselves so that so they feel like they don't look bad. Whereas since I've taken myself away from all that, I just do now what suits. And so I remember my eldest saying one day, I think he got to about 12, and he said, "You haven't got to do the birthday cake anymore. Just make a chocolate sponge and fine."
can I say something about that? Because you actually just raised a really important point, which is I do think, and I do think it is more of a female thing than a male thing. I do think women in general, please don't shoot me for saying this, but are are worse at looking at other women and
Yeah,
actually saying we need to compete in terms of the emotional landscape, especially around children and whatever. I I mentioned to you, like, today at the school, like, so many people had made cars and stuff for them all to go in and spent. Some women said they'd spent like 7 or 8 hours on them. Didn't see, actually, I think some husbands had helped a tiny bit, but I didn't hear any husband saying they'd spent any enormous amount of time on it. But you could see what was happening, right, in the playground. The women were
everybody.
looking at the other women, not the children. They were looking at the other women to see the reaction. Look what I've done for my child. Look, my child's got a better one than you. And it's the same with the present thing, right? I think most blokes go, actually, why are you giving them 10 quid so they can give £10 back to you? This is a complete waste of time. Complete waste of time. Whereas women, it's like, well, um, we have to give them something because they've given us something. It's like, why? Right?
I think since I've checked out of, I never massively got involved in that, but I think, again, I know I bring it round to it. Once I got diagnosed, I kind of then was okay with what I was okay with. And so I try to talk about that, because I've got a lot of friends that will say to me, "Oh, I love it when you say that," or they identify, and I say, just stop worrying about what other people think. Stop worrying, because actually, if they do think negative or whatever, then either speak to them or find out why, because there's usually a why behind their thing. Because, to
Yeah.
be quite honest, if I give somebody a present, sorry, if somebody gives me a present, I accept it in the good faith that it was given, and that I wouldn't want someone to spend heaps on me unless they could afford it and they wanted to. So I say, "Oh, don't do that." And now I'll say, "That was really kind of you. Thank you very much for giving me that, instead of trying to raise the bar. Because it's so, I do think women have a lot to learn from men, because I think women will emotionally exhaust themselves with that. But the other side of it, I think I often say, how many men do you see are stressed? I say stressed because they don't sweat that small stuff, which is, however, that on the more serious note we talked about is that I think that men often don't talk about things. And so women, when we talked about those rates of when things don't go right in people's lives, I won't say the word, but it's worse. Women will talk and show they're struggling, whereas men don't, and then it goes down a bad route. So I think there is a lot to learn, but I think that's where bringing it to an end, that I think if men and women do talk more, whether it's in a relationship or in the workplace, we could learn a lot by listening and then acting on that, not just coming at it from where we're from, but to actually look at where the other person is coming from and why. Absolutely.
We've run out of time, folks. It's nearly an hour, and we have to keep it under an hour, otherwise we can't restream it. So here we go. That's been a brilliant conversation today. You might have found it a little bit mirandering at times. You might find that you might disagree completely with anything that me and Marianne have said. But basically, we're just throwing, verbal diarrhea out there. Some of it's our own observation, some of it's just what we've heard, and some of it
is our experience, and that's real.
And that's our experience. As with all of these things, we're not naive. We know that it's not all about men being one thing, women being another thing. There will be men that are absolutely brilliant at DIY. There will be women that are absolutely brilliant at DIY. There will be men that are fantastic fathers, fantastic romantic individuals who constantly think about their relationship and their other half's needs all of the time. We're not saying that everybody's the same, but if it sparked any kind of conversation or interest with you today, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, etc. What a complicated mess of a world we live in, and that's a beautiful thing at the same time. I really do think that. And again, it all comes down to one thing, folks, which is that we should stop making assumptions
and communicate more.
And communicate better with each other. So if you want to say something now, if you want to throw stuff back at us, do that, but do it with love, please, because we're human too, and we will get upset if you're nasty to us. We hope you have a great week. We'll see you again next week with more of the same. But until then, have a better way of life. Bye for now.